Hello everyone, my name is Chaos and welcome to this video about roles in Rocket League. You know or you don't know, a couple of days ago I posted a poll on Twitter asking if you guys would be interested in more replay analysis or if you would be interested in role analysis. So what I mean by that is maybe I have to explain that one a little bit further. I've seen and heard a couple of times in the bubble scene that players like to, identify themselves as a more first man player or something like that, where they give themselves like a particular role. And in my opinion, it's not really the best thing to do. As everyone probably knows, in a game of Rocket League, you're constantly cycling between first, second, third, or the other way around, third, second, first, in order, to complete rotation. So that would mean that basically in every single scenario, in every single role that you find yourself in, you need to be able to know what to do. So therefore, I wanted to make this video to, explain my view on what to do in every single situation and every single role. And to do that, obviously, I need to explain how the system really works. So everyone knows that you can be a third man, second man, or first man during the game in rotation, and you obviously, like I said, constantly cycle between that. But obviously, what you do as a first, second, and third man also depends on whether you have the ball or not and where you are on the pitch. So your decision making as a first man might change a little bit from being into your defensive third as opposed to being, in the opponent's half in the offensive third or in the midfield, So that's why I wanted to make this video to explain all of these things individually and help you through understanding what you should look at and what you should try to do in every single situation. This is a lot of information, but I'm trying to do this to just give every player, upcoming player, bubble players, whatever, a little guide on to finding a little bit more structure in their decision making in rotation. So yeah, let's start at the beginning. The first man role is the thing that I like to go for first. Is basically a thing that is that people sometimes make a mistake in because of they don't really understand what the goal of the first man is. So I'm just gonna use, as you can see in the background here, one of the games from the Team Queso versus Dignitas series, the grand finals of Regional 1 in the winter split. And this is the final game. I think this is game number 6, where obviously Team Queso take the dub in the end, as you can see on the timeline. And so first man, like I said, is divided, or like every role is divided into having the ball or not, and then being in a certain position. So, for instance, here, the first one is Joyo is basically Joyo is basically first man here, and he has a free touch on the ball, right? So he approaches. It was a good challenge by Rise to help out the follow up, but then here Joyo has a free ball. So basically, what you want to do as a first man in the offensive third is, if you have the ball, you basically treat every single challenge or every single opponent challenging you as a 1v1, and the goal is that you make a touch, you get around the player. So for here, for instance, Joyo needs to make a touch against apparently Jack, because apparently Jack is also going for the ball, or at least he's going to take the boost, and then afterwards he's going to go for the ball. But Joyo's task here is to get the ball around apparently Jack without losing control. So he's going to make some sort of a touch where it allows him to get past Jack, but also stay in control over the ball. Therefore, whenever he lands and he takes control again, he can repeat that same process over again with maybe Scrubkilla in goal now challenging. So he's going to take the first little touch, he gets past Jack, he gets bumped in the process, but Scrub doesn't decide to go for the ball. He leaves the ball for Joyo again, and this allows Joyo to redo that whole process that he did with Jack. But instead of just trying to get around Scrubkilla, he decides to go for the shot on goal, and he scores a really nice goal. So this is something that is very, very important, and it's a mindset that you need to you really need to start, you know, implementing in your playstyle. So whenever you have an opportunity like this to have a free touch on the ball, you don't just immediately shoot it towards the backboard or stuff like that. So it's something that a lot of bubble players like to do. They like to keep the speed in the play, but it's not really necessary. So in this way, Joyo gets closer to the goal, gives himself in the end the opportunity to shoot. But by doing this, he gets around players. He neutralizes players. So Jack is out of the play after this. Scrubkilla, and for some reason, doesn't decide to go for the ball. And then again, Joyo gets the opportunity to just shoot. So, like I said, this was just about, you know, the first man role in offense when you have the ball, but you can do this sort of thing in every single position. So in defensive third, you're also going to try and, you know, keep control over the ball, get around players and then move up the field. And as a third, like in midfield, it's going to be basically the same. So as a first man, if you're on the ball, basically what you want to do is you want to try and neutralize as much players as you can by doing this thing where you get around the player but still end up in control over the ball. Up until the point where you, like Joyo just did, can shoot on target and score a goal, or you can pass through to middle to a teammate or wherever your teammate might be. So that's basically what I think you should do, is as a first man in basically almost every single position. So yeah, this is perfectly executed by Joyo. Of course, he gets around Jack, gets a shot, and therefore it ends up in goal. Okay, so let's look at the situation from Ryze's POV. So from the kickoff on, obviously Ryze is going for that boost. He beats Joreus after the kickoff, and then he lands on the opponent's side, gets the bump Jack, and this is where the play happens that Joyo makes. So normally in a normal standard rotation, you would argue that Vatira basically he has to push middle to be ready for the pass because he's technically second man. But here Queso decides to, you know, shift it around a little bit, let Ryze cut in back because he obviously got delayed a little bit by the bump he got on Jack for his rotation. So therefore they decide to have Vatira stay back a little bit further and let Ryze cut into the second man position. So basically, if you're in offense, especially in the offensive third and you're a second man, basically the thing you have to do is you have to be in the positive position, which I like to call it, which is if Joyo gets it around Scrubkilla as well, then the ball is obviously going towards the midfield, and there your second man, being Ryze here, needs to be ready to take a shot on that. That's basically what they have to do. They have to be in a good position where they can receive the pass and shoot the ball on target to obviously try and score the goal. So yeah, with that as well, I also sort of explained what the third man needs to do, because Vatira here is your third man. He's staying behind Joyo to, you know, guard the negative outcome of this play. So the positive outcome for Ryze is that if Ryze starts his rotation, so he's going towards the opposite side, he cuts in back to the second man, and therefore Vatira stays back a little bit further as a third. So Ryze is the positive, and he is waiting for the pass in midfield. And then Vatira guards the negative, which is obviously Scrub or Jack getting the ball, or like touching the ball over Joyo and back to, you know, towards Vatira, where Vatira can pick it up again. So basically, there's two outcomes. The positive, ball goes to middle, Ryze is there. The negative, Joyo gets the ball taken away from him by Jack or Scrub here, and there Vatira is waiting to pick up the ball. So that's basically the whole thing. First, second, and third man explained in the offensive third. Now over to you know, first, second, and third man in the midfield when you're in possession. We can see this here from Joreus's POV. So basically what happens is Scrub tries to pass it to Jack. It's a little bit later on in the replay, and then this 50-50 happens, and Joreus can see, okay, I have a lot of open space. So what he decides to do, again, is take control over the ball, wait for the challenge to come in, try to win the challenge. Somehow gets it past the second one, but like I said, he's trying to stay in control. He's trying to get it past one there, and then afterwards he's immediately trying to get back into control over the ball so he can do the same thing over and over again. So Joyo challenges. He challenges a little bit too high. Therefore, Jorius can go for the low 50-50. He does still have his flip. And then he gets it over the second. And that's basically what he has to do. Tries to deliver the ball to middle. Doesn't really work. But that is basically what you want to try and do. And this is basically how every single, you know, very, very skilled player in RLCS will try to play this. Is they will slow down the ball, because if you just bang this forward, and this is something that some teams like to do, is they will try to, you know, bang the ball towards the right wall to try and pass it to Scrub or something, instead of, you know, taking control themselves and try to dribble. You're taking a risk by doing that, of course, but the reason why you want to do this as well is, if you can, you know, keep your you know, your reinforcements. So like, for instance, Scrub Killer, if you can keep those available instead of, you know, immediately using them by passing, you know, you can send Scrub Killer for a demo. You can have Scrub Killer be available for a pass in a later stage in the attack. But it's always going to be better if you, especially if you have this much space, to take control yourself, try to, you know, outplay a couple of players by yourself, and before going for a passing play. So again, Jorius takes control, low 50s first, gets over the second, and this is basically a perfect example on what to do if you get control over the ball in the midfield. It's basically exactly the same as it is in the offensive third. The only thing you have to do is obviously traverse a little bit more of a distance. So yeah. So let's watch this play here from Scrub's POV. So he ends up going for the boost, and then decides to rotate into the back. And something very awkward that happens is, as you can see there in the midfield, Jack gets demoed. So basically, Jack was second man up until that point. And Jack was gonna, you know, push the middle to be, you know, the positive, like I said earlier. The positive being Jorius, like he does here, miraculously getting it around two defenders at the same time. And then obviously he will try to dribble it to middle to pass. So that was ideally what Jack's position was going to be. He was going to be in the midfield to receive the pass and shoot on target. So that was the second man. Obviously he gets demoed, and the second man position is abandoned here. And Scrub's position here is third man. So he is waiting for either Joyo or Vatira to get you know, take the ball away from Jorius, to get a touch towards Scrub. So basically the same thing as an offense. You have one player in the middle that is, you know, waiting for that infield pass or something along the lines to come in. And then you have the third man, which is Scrub here, to wait for, you know, an opponent to win the challenge or win the 50-50 against Jorius, and the ball will, and therefore the ball coming towards them. So they are basically the backup for the negative, and then you would have had Jack in the middle to receive a pass for a shot again. All right, so let's move on over to defense here. So we're on board with Vatira again, and in a little bit of time he will receive a shot on target from Jack here, and he has to make the save. So afterwards, if you make the save, the easiest thing you can do, or the safest thing you can do, is put the ball to either corner. The corners are basically the safest, or one of the safest positions the ball can be in defense. Obviously, if the ball is in the corner, the angle for the shot will be very difficult, as well as the challenge, or like the control that Vatira still has is also crucial. So he puts it towards the corner. He can take the boost afterwards if he wants to. He then passes it to middle, past Scrub, into Rise for a shot. So the thing here as a first man you need to do in defense is, whenever you get the ball, is you keep the ball safe. And like I said, the corners are a very easy way to do this. You touch the ball towards the corner, you try to make sure that it rolls up one of the curves, or like the curve thing, so you can touch the ball into the air, try to get a big clear, or a pass towards a teammate that is somewhere in the midfield, something like that. Or, if possible, like I said in the beginning, as a first man, you can also try to just keep the ball close to yourself and bait out a challenge from, you know, a an upcoming player. So Scrub here, as you can see, is just about to jump up for this ball. What Vatira could have done as well is if he could have just tried to get it over Scrubkilla and go for an air drag, but in the end he decides to immediately pass it towards the middle, which is fine obviously because Scrub is the player in the middle in the midfield challenging, and if he's outplayed, then as you can see here, Rise has a free shot. So good play by Vatira, keeps the ball safe after catching it here. He doesn't make a flip necessarily. I mean, he does, but the flip, doesn't necessarily give the ball a lot of extra momentum away from him. So normally, a flip would be a bad thing here, but Vatira uses the flip in a way where he will stay close to the ball. So normally, a flip will delay your recovery and all that. But since he's flipping in the same direction as the ball, and the ball doesn't really necessarily have a lot more momentum than he does, it's perfectly fine. So he is able to get the boost in the end. He quickly passes to middle. This is his way of outplaying a player. No one in the midfield for Dignitas to stop Rise from shooting, so perfectly fine. Then if we switch to Rise, see what he does, because he obviously also was in defense. So he was the last man here, goes up for the aerial, doesn't find contact with the challenge on Jorius. Basically the same thing as an offense last time. You have one player in defense prioritizing, Joyo moving into the third man position here, and again Rise deciding to cut rotation here. And cut from, obviously rotating back into defense, where ideally or like generally he should be getting into the third man. They decide to leave Joyo in the back first because he's already there. And then they can see, okay, Vatira is getting this ball out of defense pretty well. Rise decides to cut in again and goes for that second man position again in the midfield, where he's waiting for that positive, meaning Vatira getting a pass towards the midfield where Rise will be waiting. And then obviously third man again, Jorius, or Joyo rather, he went for the shot here, or the block. He's starting to rotate back. He tries to farm some boosts. Maybe should have picked up a couple of arm pads, but that's a detail. These guys have nerves too, of course. So yeah, he rotates back. Ideally, again, should grab a couple more pads, but he's staying close towards the goal where he can, help out his team if necessary. So again, second man covering the positive, third man covering the negative. And then we get over to, how to react when your opponents have the ball, so when you're not in possession. And basically, there's a couple of golden rules for that. I will try to look for a situation first. Hang on. All right, so we're back into sort of the beginning of the game here. We're on board with Jack. So the whole situation is here. Scrub gets sort of like a 50-50 or like a challenge into Vatira. Vatira can't immediately get back to this, and Jack, again with the first touch, gets it around him. But afterwards he loses control, or like he loses possession. He can't get back to the ball before Joyo does. So he shoots it up. Joyo takes control on the backboard. And Jack basically here is first man in the offensive third, and is not in possession of the ball. So what he will do is he will, obviously challenge Joyo from here. But the biggest misconception, I think, for some bubble players is that the thing you have to understand, being a first man in this scenario, is it's not absolutely necessary for you to hit the ball. And it makes more sense in offense than it does in defense. But I will get to explaining that as well. So this is where I start talking about that bait and switch system. Basically what this does is the first man, so being Jack here, will go for the ball, but without full priority of actually hitting the ball. So what he needs to do is he needs to get Joyo to get a harder touch or a more powerful touch, where he gets it around Jack, but therefore delivers it to, I can see Scrub on that side, so I would assume Jorius. So Jack goes. Obviously, Joyo gets it around him. And let's switch over to Jorius's POV. Jorius receives the ball. This is basically perfectly what the bait and switch is, you know, you see Jack is going in, and it's easy to see from Jorius's POV as well. So Jack gets that first touch, Joyo takes control, Joyo gets it around Jack, but can't get back to it before Jorius does. And that's basically what the ideal bait and switch should look like. And you can basically do that in any scenario. So this is basically what the first and second man role looks like in this in the offensive third. So an opponent has control. The first man will sort of, you know, dive, as people like to call it. They will dive, and the second man will be there for support to pick up the ball after this happens. So this is, you know, the first and second man performing that bait and switch. And then obviously you have the third man, which is, you know, in rotation right now. Scrub is in rotation, but he will get back towards his own half before, you know, the ball gets to Jorius. So he's far enough in rotation to be safe enough. And it's basically the same thing in you know, in the midfield. Okay, so here we have a situation that explains it more in the midfield. So Vatira goes up for the aerial here for an air drag. And Scrub immediately decides to go, you know, as the first man, he immediately decides to challenge. And as every bubble player probably knows, especially with it being Vatira on the ball, that this is a very, very difficult read for Scrub to make. But that doesn't really matter. Again, the goal for Scrub is not really to hit the ball. It's just to make sure that Vatira either needs to use his flip reset or get a more powerful touch on the ball, therefore losing control over that air drag. And that's where Jack comes in to ideally, you know, take control over the situation again. But what does Vatira do? Is he obviously, you know, sees this coming and he gets a flip reset past Scrub, and he doesn't go for the ball again because he lost control over that, but he decides to go for the bump. And this is something that is a very, very good solution to trying to play around that bait and switch maneuver in defense. Again, like I said, it's in the I would say the midfield here. So Scrub goes for this you know, dive as the first man, and then Jack needs to try and help him. Jorius comes in for defense. Basically the same thing as in the offensive third. And it will also be the same in defense. So you will have a player that's sort of goes for the challenge. You need the backup, and you need the player that's guarding goal, basically. So that sort of defense strategy is basically what you want to go for. So the main thing that I would try to remember about this is that if you are the first man and the opponents have the ball, don't, you know, wait for too long to try and find an ideal way to actually touch the ball, because in the end, like I said, it's mostly not really the main thing you want to go for. Especially in higher ranks, you know, if you're a first man and you're diving towards a ball, like, chances are if an opponent is dribbling, they will get it around you anyway, because they will get a good flick or they get a good dribble, something like that. So basically you need to sort of sacrifice yourself to throw yourself at that play, and in that way making sure that the teammate behind you can easily pick up the ball because you forced that opponent to flick it over you, something like that. You know, force them to lose control over the ball for like a couple of seconds, and then where your second man can push in to take over the ball. And then again, like I said, Jorius here moving into defense as a third man. So the third man, if you don't have the ball, should always be rotating to or somewhere in a position where they can block a shot at any time, or where they can make a save at any time, basically. So to give you a clear look of what that bait and switch should look like in defense, like in close to your goal, really, as you have Rise on the ball, he's dribbling, and both Scrubkilla and Jorius are like not really in the best positions to try and challenge, but basically one of them has to. You want to try and, you know, force Rise to get a flick, make a shot as early as you can, obviously to have as much time as possible to react to his shot or flick. But here it takes quite long. Luckily, Jory is in a good position to, you know, make the save. And that's where it all starts again. That's where they defend and make that play outwards. So to summarize this whole thing, I'm gonna just summarize it by every role and position. We started with, you know, the offensive first man and basically being in possession. And I talked about the whole thing where, like Joyo does here, you take control over the ball, you bait players in, you try to get slight touches around those players to get back into control and repeat that whole process. So that's basically what you do in the offensive third, in the midfield as well, and in obviously the defensive third. You're going to try to first prioritize pushing the ball into a safer spot. So like I said, the corners are an easy way to do that. And therefore, again, starting your whole section of, you know, controlling the ball, getting touches around players, and trying to get it as far into the opponent's half as you can. The second man basically being a backup. The second man can push the midfield. He can try to play the positive, like I said, mostly, you know, being in a position where they can receive a pass from that first man. And the third man will be, you know, sitting a little bit further back, guarding the negative, you know, being in a position where they can pick up the ball if someone loses it. So, you know, the further you're into the opponent's half, the more risky that position can be. And risky meaning, you know, being more on the side, closer behind your first man. And in defense, obviously, the further you go back into your own half, the closer that will be to goal. So that's basically when you're in possession. When you're not in possession and going into first man, basically, like I said, that's where I talked about the whole baiting and switching system. And so basically, as a first man, you're the initiator of that whole bait and switch system. So basically, what your task is you're gonna, you know, drive up to the ball, speed up to the ball, up to the opponent that is in control over the ball, and try to force them to, you know, get a more powerful touch to make sure that your teammate behind you can pick it up afterwards. So that's the second man. So just to make sure that you understand, the first man, when you're not in possession, doesn't really necessarily need to hit the ball. They just have to force the opponent off of the ball to make sure that your second man can come in behind you and help you out, pick up the ball. So yeah, that's basically what the second man needs to do in that scenario. Is they have to be in a good position where they can pick up the ball. The third man, again, just like when you're in position, you, as a third man, you basically need to be in a position where you can always make a save, guard goal. That doesn't necessarily obviously mean being in goal, but you need to be around a position where you can easily, you know, if the opponents bang the ball towards your side, that you can easily either pass the ball to a teammate immediately, or like that one situation with Vatira, that you can, you know, dribble it into a corner, where then you can start the whole first man in possession thing again, where you are in control, try to get it passed around, like around players and stuff like that. So yeah, that's basically what it is. You know, in possession, I would say the best thing you can do is learning to control. That's what the whole thing is about. And when you're not in possession, I would definitely say that you try to, you know, master that baiting and switching thing. And maybe another extra tip for that baiting and switching sort of mechanic, especially when you're not in possession of the ball. Don't try to slow down too much and fake challenge. Fake challenging can be a good thing to do sometimes, but I don't think it's in a lot of situations where you're first or second. Basically, what I would say is, if you know you have players behind you, therefore you being first or second man, trying to do that bait and switch is always going to be more beneficial than a fake challenge. The only thing, or the only situation that I would see a fake challenge being a good thing to go for is if you're third man in defense and you're all alone. Then obviously you need to solve the whole situation by yourself, and that's when that you know, that's when that fake challenge can have sort of the same effect as a bait and switch would have. So yeah, that's basically what I would say is my vision on the whole role system. Like I said in the beginning, I don't think it's necessarily a good thing for a player to, you know, describe themselves as a first or second man, because I feel like the reason they do that is more because they have a sort of a different play style or a different, you know, set of decisions that they make on the ball, rather than, you know, regarding it to a whole role, really. So some players may go for like an air drag in a certain situation. Some players may like to go for a pass. And I think this is more sort of that, you know, that set of decisions that they make that differentiates themselves between other players. And I think that's more play style rather than actual roles in the game. So like I said in the beginning, obviously you're gonna play every single role in every single game all the time. It's gonna cycle between roles all the time. So that's why I'd say it's more useful to know what to do in every single role, and not really describe yourself as a role. You can definitely have certain, you know, preferences to handle certain situations with your mechanics, or with your decision making, and that's more sort of part of your playstyle. But it doesn't really necessarily impact the way you should think and the way and like the goals you have, like all of them I explained here in those games. So yeah, thank you all so much for watching. Hopefully you learned something. Feel free to start a conversation about this on Twitter, in the comment section here on YouTube or whatever. Feel free to let me know what you think, and if you have any questions, feel free to hit me up on Twitter, Discord, here in the comment section, whatever you want to do. And yeah, let's start a conversation about this. I think this is a really interesting thing to talk about. It's some in-depth analysis, of course, but yeah. I hope I helped, or I helped a couple of bubble players realize what they need to do in certain situations, and I hope I helped you to, you know, gain a more structured vision on what to do in certain situations. So yeah, feel free to hit me up. Let's talk about this, and yeah, till next time.